Take 55.
Hello everyone and welcome to our podcast Global Insights. My name is Amelia and I'm here today with Stella to commence our first episode.
This is a school-based project, and in total we will create 4 of these kinds of episodes. 2 of them Amelia and I will be creating, and the other 2 will be made by 2 of our other friends who are part of this project, called Giz and Victoria.
And you'll meet them in the next episode. Basically, the goal of our podcast is to educate, so we'll be talking about different issues in the world that are going on right now, to hopefully teach you something. Maybe you'll take something away from it and know a little more about the world. So let's dive right into it. The topic of our first episode is child labor, and more specifically, child labor in the Democratic Republic of Congo.
In case you didn't know what child labor is defined as, the definition of child labor are children that are involved in hazardous activities that may comprise their physical, mental, social, or educational development. Basically what it's saying is it deprives children of their childhood.
According to Human Rights Watch, which is an NGO, 160 million children, that's almost 1 in 10 children, are engaged in child labor worldwide. 80 million of those, so around half, are working in hazardous or dangerous conditions. Child labor can be found in agriculture, in mining, domestic labor, and also in other sectors.
According to another NGO called UNICEF, in the world's poorest countries, or what you might have heard as the third world country or a less developed country, 1 in 5 children from the ages of 5 to 17 are engaged in child labor that is considered detrimental to their health and development. In West and Central Africa, 26% of children are involved in child labor.
The reason for child labor, it's often due to economic reasons. So these children might come from a background of poverty. It can also be due to sudden illness or job loss of a caregiver. So maybe the parents cannot work anymore or earn enough money to support the family, which means the children have to step in. And another reason, it can also be due to trafficking. So people actually traffic children in order to make them work. And these children, they often receive lower wages than their adult counterparts because children are more easily exploited and abused, so they're a lot more submissive and can't really stand up for themselves.
The worst forms of child labor that have been recorded and are known to happen all around the world are children being enslaved, separated from their families, and exposed to serious hazards and illnesses. When we think of child labor, as we also said previously, we think of less developed countries where people live in extreme poverty. But this child labor can often be seen in large businesses in more developed countries, such as the US. As an example, we chose Walmart, which was fined by the US Department of Labor for making children work on dangerous machinery.
So yeah, it's not only taking place in less developed countries, but also in more developed countries. Or, I guess in a different sense, more developed countries can also take advantage of this in lower developed countries.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be talking more about mining, especially mining cobalt in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And this is because mining is widely recognized as one of the worst forms of child labor that there is.
As we will be talking about cobalt as our main topic, we thought, for those of you who don't know what exactly cobalt is, it's a raw material found in the Earth's crust and is a metal which powers the batteries of mobile phones and other electronic devices.
So it's basically everywhere. If you have an iPhone right now, there's probably cobalt in it right now. So
it's good to think about these things, where they come from, how they were produced, and what company you are actually supporting by buying their products.
Yes, exactly. Are there more? No. More than half the world's cobalt comes from the Republic of Congo, which is located in Central Africa. And according to UNICEF and Amnesty, around 40,000 children work in the mines in the Democratic Republic of Congo, extracting cobalt.
These young children work as artisanal miners, which means that they are not actually seen as workers, but they still do the work, which means they don't get the right equipment and they're often working under worse conditions than industrial miners, which are the miners that are actually employed.
Yeah, so they're basically just not officially employed, which makes it even worse for them. But yeah, basically what happens is that these children, they dig holes that are tens of meters deep, and again they do this without a permit, so it's very dangerous for them. And after they have dug the hole, they handpick cobalt-rich rocks from the Earth's crust. Because they don't have the equipment or the experience that you actually need for mining, it can be very fatal.
Exactly, so these children work under the risk of collapse due to the deep holes that they work in and the tunnels. Nothing in these tunnels is actually secure. The Earth is an unpredictable force. These children also work tremendously long hours with little breaks. They, as mentioned before, also get extremely paid less than normal workers. Due to the not having a permit, they do not get the protection they need. And these children inhale harmful dusts and therefore get fatal illnesses.
Also called hard middle lung disease, which is actually a potentially fatal condition. And another form of illness is when the children experience skin contact with cobalt. It can cause dermatitis, which is basically like a chronic rash.
These children work up to or a minimum amount of 12 hours a day. And they're hauling between 20 and 40 kilograms for $1 or $2 a day. And because of the poverty that these children face, they have a huge lack of nutrition, which means their bodies cannot support this weight that they are carrying and the work that they are doing.
Adding on to that, the mines are actually run by different companies, so mining companies may have different territories, and when children accidentally trespass into land not belonging to their company, they may face physical violence by security guards. And as mentioned before, the children are easily exploited because they have to accept what the traders pay them, as they, first of all, can't stand up for themselves, and they're not officially employed.
This damages the development of the country, as there is no future to these children. They have no education, they cannot get another job, and they will be raised to do this kind of work in these hazardous environments.
And we have found a source called The Guardian, which is a pretty well-known news reporter. And some of the journalists from The Guardian actually went to the DRC, or to Congo, and followed these children around every day to see what they're actually doing when they work, and they also interviewed them on their lives. And now we're going to read 2 passages from an article which described the lives of 2 children working in the mines.
So I'll first be talking about a young girl named Elodie. Elodie is 15. Her 2-month-old son is wrapped tightly in a frayed cloth around her back. He inhales potentially lethal mineral dust every time he takes a breath. Toxicity assaults at every turn. Earth and water are contaminated with industrial runoff, and the air is brown with a noxious haze. Elodie's on her own here, orphaned by cobalt mines that took both her parents. She spends the entire day bent over, digging with a small shovel to gather enough cobalt-containing heterogeneity stone to rinse at nearby Lake Malo to fill 1 sack. It will take her an entire day to do so, after which Chinese traders will pay her about 65 cents for this work. Hopeless though it may be, it is her and her child's only means of survival.
The second passage is about Arthur. Arthur is a 16-year-old boy who joined a group of young men who spent 2 months digging a tunnel 26 meters straight down before they hit a heterogenite vein, which is basically a cobalt-rich vein. Now they descend into darkness each day, spending up to 24 hours at a time in narrow tunnels, unable to stand, hacking away for cobalt. Every minute is suffused with dread because many tunnels have collapsed in Kasselo, burying alive everyone inside.
A lot of these industrial mines are run by Chinese companies. They also run most of the buying houses. And then it gets shipped to China. After refining the cobalt, it is sold to major component manufacturers and consumer electronic companies across the world.
The prices of cobalt have actually increased by 300% in the past 2 years, but sadly this is not reflected in the wages of mining workers or child laborers. This just shows that children are ever more exploited in their labor and that companies across the world are actually involved in it.
Brands such as Apple and Samsung do not tell us where their cobalt comes from that they use in their products, which makes us assume that they are part of the child labor in the Congan mines.
What this means is that companies need to take greater responsibility and they have to inform themselves and the world about where their cobalt comes from to ensure clean and ethical production. Government, corporates, NGOs, activists, they all have to work together to try and solve this issue.
As an example of that, Dua Lipa, a very famous pop singer, uses smart power of her fame to bring awareness to this as she interviews the CEO of Apple, Tim Cook. She asks if he can guarantee that the cobalt in the new iPhone 15 was created without the use of child labor. Tim Cook replied by saying that it was used without the use of child labor. But to what extent can we rely on just a yes? And how are we sure that they're used without child labor if most of the cobalt that is obtained is through the use of child labor?
And a solution to this could be to set up a third-party system of verification. This already exists to some extent in certain countries, but of course it's not established enough. But what this means is that companies would set up around these mines, which would check the mining businesses and make sure that they are following the human rights and not employing children as workers. I think a question which we had and which you might have as well is why the government of Congo and maybe also of other countries haven't done enough or maybe very little to stop this child labor, because it seems to be a very big issue in these countries. And the sad reality is that child labor can actually benefit an economy because, as we mentioned, child laborers are cheaper than actual laborers. And this is why governments may not take enough action to stop this. But on the bright side, after an amnesty report and after more companies were publishing their data on where they were getting their cobalt from, the Democratic Republic of Congo has actually admitted to child labor for the first time, and they've made it their goal to try and end it.
But for this, of course, they will need a lot of international help from other countries, as it is incredibly difficult to leave the state of poverty.
And of course, if you want to help, you can do that as well. And the best way to support the abolition of child labor is by donating to some of the NGOs that we've mentioned throughout the episode, such as Amnesty or UNICEF, because they actually do a lot of work in these regions to help these children and to try and solve this big issue.
As we've said, a small step goes a long way, and even if you're just creating awareness about this issue as we are, it's one step towards the development of Congo and
the abolition of child labor.
Exactly.
We hope you learned something from this. We hope we were able to raise some awareness about this topic. Maybe you will take some of this with you and tell some other people about it.
Thank you for listening. We hope to see you next episode.
Bye.